We're now going to be auto-wiring with a Java Bean configuration. We can already see that in our main method it's going to look a little bit different than what we've done previously. So we're going to do a quick recap. We haven't touched our POM XML file. We have all of our dependencies and our properties inside of here. We're not using our IoT device or IoT device bean configuration. We configured all these in the playlist link below the like button in previous videos. We are also not touching our XML file here, so we don't need to worry about this right now. What we are going to be dealing with is our specifically car and car bean configuration, which is a new class that we're going to make, and our main. With our engine one, we're not changing anything. We still have our variables, our getters, our setters, and our constructors here. And then in our car, we have our variables. We have a public car, which is just going to be a constructor. It's going to be defaulted. We are going to have a parameterized constructor. We have our getters and setters down here. And then we have an auto wire and a qualifier for this specific set engine right here. And we're just going to be setting the engine. Inside of our constructors and also inside of this right here, we have string methods, or not methods, but we have print lines. That way we can see if this is outputting to our console. We're seeing the flow of our program. It's really nice. So that's just a quick recap. Now this right here, engine Lamborghini, is hard-coded. It can be quite limiting. So what we can do is set it to be the type of engine, right? That's what we're doing here. But we are not going to be doing that. So instead, we want to set bean configurations using a Java config file. We've done this kind of like in our XML, but we're going to be doing it in our Java config file. So we can go into our project. We want to go into our auto package. We want to create a new class, the car bean config. We create this class, and then from here, we are going to write inside of it. So this is what we are in currently. We are going to import our context annotation for the bean and for our configuration right here. The bean is just to get the beans. The Java source file is meant to act as a bean configuration file, so that's why we need the configuration and the bean. We're going to prefix this with a configuration, at configuration right here. That's super important. Because of how we configured our car.java file using the auto wiring, our beans are going to be already linked to each other. So that's also important to note. And now we can actually look at this program. So we have our public class car bean config, and just like in our XML file, we're going to be making our beans here. However, we make them a little bit differently. This one we say at bean right here. We are going to make the instance of our bean. We have a public car bean like this. We're going to make a new instance of our car class right here, and we're going to set everything inside of here. We don't set the engine though, we don't need to, because inside of our car.java we can see that we have an auto wire here. And we went over auto wiring previously in the playlist link below the like button, but essentially what this is doing is it's going to use the default constructor. You can see this in the output. So when we do this, we have our default constructor. We are going to come into the setting engine in car, so that means that we are auto wiring right here. We have this .engine is equal to engine. And that means what we're going to have to do is through here, we are going to go into our engine.java. Because of our auto wiring, it's going to link these together. And so we are going to set all these different things in here like this. So looking at our car bean configuration, it's going to call our engine right here. We have this at bean, right? So we have at bean engine Lamborghini. Inside of our car, this makes a little bit more sense. This qualifier is saying, well, look for an engine Lamborghini for our beans. This is where all of our beans are stored. We're basically going from here to here, seeing that we need engine Lamborghini bean, going back to our beans, seeing that this is an engine Lamborghini, and then pushing this into our engine.java. That's kind of how that would work. So we're going to pass in all of this information, and from here we are going to be using the main constructor. So we can do kind of the same thing. We can take this and put it in our engine, and this is basically doing a sysout.println and saying that's a parameterized constructor, and we can do the same thing but for the default constructor as well. So inside of here, so we see which one is which. And that's how that's going to work for our beans linking. Now we're going to go to our main. We're changing some things up here. We have our annotation config application context. From previously we just had an application context and then class XML application context. We need the annotation config application context, and then we're going to pass in our car bean config.class. We want to pass in our Java bean file right here. That's super important. Just like previously, we passed in our IoT device bean config when we were doing that for our beans. Notice how we have our beans inside of here, very similar to what we're doing here. So we're doing that inside of our main. We are going to make a new instance of this car right here. So we have car. We're going to call it car. We need to cast this object as a car. We have our app context.getBean. So we're passing this bean class in here. Then we're getting the bean from it, specifically the car bean, because our engine is linked to it. And then we're just going to print out that output right there. So we can go up here, we can run it. We can see it passes through the default constructor. It goes through our parameterized constructor. And this parameterized constructor is going to be for, I believe, for the engine right here. So this should be the parameterized constructor. Let's say parameterized constructor for engine. Probably spelled that wrong, but let's see if we can check that by running it right here. You can see parameterized constructor for engine. This is great to monitor the flow of a program. So we have our default constructor it goes into. So we call the car bean. We're going to go into our car bean config right here. We go all of this right here. We go to our engine. So we're going to go into the engine down here. Through here, we want to go into the parameterized constructor. You can see that because in here, we are just going to pass in all of this right here. This is passing it into the parameterized constructor. And then we are going to be in the setting engine of our car. So notice how we go through here first, and then we into the setting engine. So this sets the engine, and then we have the car obtained from the bean. That's part of our main, and then we output our car with all of our car information inside of here. So that is big, and that's how we look at auto wiring with a Java bean configuration versus when we did it in our XML.